The Winnipeg Jets got off to a good start in their playoff series against St. Louis, but do they have what it takes to go on a long run? Harrison Lee of Locked On Winnipeg Jets joins us to discuss that and more on today's Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, Harrison Lee. And Harrison, you had to be pleased with the results of Game 1 against the Jets, against the Blues. Was this what you expected more or less from the Winnipeg Jets in the playoffs?
Yeah, I thought the first game might be a little rusty, might be a little back and forth. I will say that, the Blues, I think, came out faster than I expected. So the Jets at first did have some trouble, especially with the early pressure. I think Winnipeg had a couple of moments that they would probably like back. But overall, once they kind of settled down, you kind of knew that, even with the Blues having a tough defensive structure, the Jets do have the talent to, tie it up, come back, and they came back 2 or 3 times last night. So overall, especially once the third period hit, came away really, really impressed.
What is it about the Jets that makes you the most confident that they're going to win this series?
So I think the Jets have recently been playing very suffocating hockey ever since Vilardi went down. And this is not to say Vilardi isn't a key player. He absolutely is. But the line of Connor and Scheifele and Vilardi wasn't – they weren't bad this year. Last year they were objectively terrible. This year they've been more break-even. And they can still outscore, some of their defensive problems. But ever since Iafallo went up there, the CSI line has really – led the way in a lot of respects. Their forechecking has improved, they're getting more zone time, and it's really helped to balance out the top 9 in a way that, unfortunately injuries making the Jets better has kind of been a theme in past years. That's kind of happened a little bit here. And I just think the Blues, once you get past their top 6 in structure, they don't have as many ways to improvise. They really have to lean on Kyrou, Thomas, Parayko. They have to hope that Binnington doesn't have a bad night, which last night he was good. So that part, at least they check the box. But I think it's one of the situations where the Jets are playing so well that you're going to have to be perfect against them, and the Blues just aren't.
Were you a little surprised by the lack of overall shots on goal in Game 1?
Not from the Jets' perspective or really from the Blues either. This was going to be, I think, technically a low-event series. Where I think the Jets definitely led was if you look at the scoring chances, the shot attempts and all that, Winnipeg was definitely creating tons of stuff. It just wasn't really getting towards the net. So that's one of those things where the Blues tend to be very stingy. They're not going to give you a lot in the slot. I think that they did start to give up some big stuff later in the game once they were a bit more tired. But it's going to be one of those series where it's just stingy and very physical, not a lot of space. It's part of the reason why I was I was hoping the Blues would win a few more games so that they could be the ones to piss off the Knights. But seems like we are going to get the Minnesota matchup route instead.
What concerns you most about facing the Blues?
So I guess the team's health could be an issue. The Blues really came out very physical, and, the Jets haven't been the healthiest the past couple of months, so that could be a concern. If there's another area where I would prefer the Jets to maybe be a little cleaner, it's on that PK. The Blues power play is not crazy, but it's good enough to where if you don't clear the crease, if you don't shut down some of those shooting lanes, they're going to pick their targets, and I think that they did that last night. I saw lots of criticism directed Hellebuck's way, and I'm like, I don't know. I watched the PK not really remove the screen in front of him. He plays deep naturally. It's part of how his game is built. And so I just saw a lot of sometimes I think people look at the small samples and they hyper focus on certain details. And I'm like, the Jets PK just wasn't good. I think that was one of the biggest reasons they gave up goals on both. You'd like maybe one of those to not go in, but you got Kyrou and Thomas, who are players you just can't give any time and space to. The moment you do, you're going to get punished. That's how they've played this whole year. And so those guys, I think, are going to continue to be threats. But, the rest of it, I just think you just want to stay healthy and try and get through this series in as few games as possible.
As far as the Jets are concerned, give me a player who, may not be known nationwide, but is a key player for the Jets' success in this series and beyond.
The big one's going to be Morgan Barron. Barron has kind of really stepped up in the bottom six. And I know a lot of fourth liners and stuff tend to be a little overstated. With the Jets' fourth line, I think that they've really been key to being that sort of linking like line change where, you're then going to start rolling back to your top nine. And the fourth line has just created so much chaos. Last night, they scored a great goal. They've been just constantly buzzing around the net regardless of who's there. And their resurgence and especially good play recently has kind of come just back from Morgan being moved to center again. He was at wing for a while this year, didn't really look the same like he did last year. And then past couple months, he's been back in the 4C role, and he's looked like the Baron that I saw, who looked like he was primed for a bigger role this season. So glad to see him kind of take over. The other guy that I think would probably be worth shouting out, there's a little bit of cheating, but it's going to be Iafallo. I think him on that top line and where he continues to play once everyone's healthy is a really big question mark for me. I don't know how anyone can look at how the CSI line has played recently and want to break them up. They've just been so dominant and so good, and it's helped out Winnipeg's depth so much that, Iafallo's really become a key piece, and fantastic that they got him back on a nice contract too.
What's the key to winning this series for the Winnipeg Jets?
For Winnipeg, I think it's just going to be to stay disciplined. At 5v5, the Jets showed their teeth yesterday. The Blues are a tough team. I mean, they don't really give you a lot, and yet the Jets still found ways to scrap out, big moments, which is a little bit different than other years where I think Winnipeg sometimes wilted under the pressure. But the PK, if they don't adjust and if they continue to have some issues there, that's where I think the Blues really do have, a big opportunity. So just don't give their big guns freebies. Don't mismanage the puck like they did in the first half of the game. And I think things will just sort of naturally fall into place. I know people will say, well, Hellebuck's not going to make enough saves. And I'm like, yeah, he's fine. I'm not too worried about it. So I think everyone will, stop overreacting once he starts making a few more normal saves. And we can all go back to just talking about how good the series is instead.
The Jets have had some great regular seasons, spoiled to an extent by disappointing playoffs. What is the key to making this year different?
So it's the 5v5 game. In previous years, every time the Jets were in a top seed, outside of 17 and 18 and 14 and 15, there were some years where the Jets were good heading into the postseason, but we're talking like maybe 52% shot share or something. Compared to other playoff teams, it's just not good enough because the Jets aren't built to be a team that kind of rides a bit above break even and, gets some opportunistic moments. They just don't have the McKinnons, the McCarrs, those guys who essentially win you the games off of a couple of shifts. You got to have a really big committee approach. And this team recently has started to just dominate 5v5 play. They're controlling opponents. They're really not giving you much in the slot. All four lines are contributing generally pretty well. The finishing still a little bit of a challenge at times, but I think there are some good signs for some big players. And the fact that they're doing all of this without Velarde and Ehlers, who are two of their most important pieces, I think is a really big testament to why this team this year has really come through. They've stepped up in a big way. And I give a lot of credit to Arniel. There are some things that I disagree with him on, but at the offseason, he said getting 5 to 10% better is what you need. And seeing how guys like Connor, defend much better now. Iafallo has really stepped up and become a totally different player on that first line. Scheifele is super bought in. Sandberg has continued his incredible ascent to being a top pairing defender. All these guys are really improving and really locked in. And I just feel like, this team has a little bit of a team of destiny running them. I don't know how far they'll go, but I feel really good about this team compared to some of the other squads where I had lots of red flags.
All right. Well, Harrison, I know you'll have every bit of it covered for the rest of the playoffs and beyond. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
They can find us at Locked On Winnipeg Jets on YouTube and all of your favorite podcasting platforms. We'll have an episode tomorrow recapping the weekend's game in a little more detail, plus a preview of tomorrow's matchup. So super excited. Hope to see y'all there. And thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you, Harrison. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you could save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout, and the app even shows you a panoramic view from your seat so you know exactly what to expect before you buy the tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.